Chapter 6. Late that evening, Maynard and Jennifer left the party in a flurry of well wishes. "Where are we staying tonight?" Jennifer asked, surprised she didn't know. "My suitcase is packed and in my cabin." "How would you feel if we just stayed in your cabin then?" "I'd planned to take my new bride back to the hotel with me, but it sounds like your place is a bit more spacious. We can stop by the hotel and gather my things." "We can if you don't mind that I've packed up most everything. I was expecting last night to be the very last time I slept there." Jennifer followed Maynard to the hotel where his car was parked. "We can put your suitcase in the car and drive over to my cabin. I have to have everything out in a week, so we can even spend the next week on the ranch if we'd like." "Sounds good to me," he said, grinning at her. "I'm glad it was you, Jennifer." She sighed, hoping he still felt that way in a month or two. "And I'm glad it was you." She was. She just hoped she hadn't completely ruined his life by marrying him. Shouldn't a man have more of a choice in the matter? She waited in the lobby while he ran up to his room to get his suitcase. She thought about following him, but decided she'd rather be a bit more unobtrusive than that. While she waited, she sat in the lobby of the hotel, thinking about how much different things looked as a guest. A few minutes later, he was back down with his suitcase in hand, a small wrapped gift in the other hand. "I got you a wedding gift. I wasn't sure what you'd like, so I had to guess." Jennifer stared at the small package. "Do you want me to open it here?" "Nah, let's wait till we get to your cabin." As they walked to his car, her heart was beating a mile a minute. She couldn't believe she was married to this man she was so incredibly attracted to, and he probably expected her to make love that night. She hoped he'd wait, but she didn't really have the right to ask him. All the way to her cabin, she fretted about how she'd feel if he wanted to go through with the wedding night immediately. She was attracted to him, yes, but she wasn't sure she was ready for that without knowing him a bit better first. She knew some women went to bed with a man on the first date, but she was not one of those women, and she never had been. Finally, as he pulled up in front of her cabin, she got up the guts to say what needed to be said. "Do you think we could spend some time getting to know each other better before the wedding night?" He gave her a huge grin. "I was going to suggest that." Jennifer stared at him in surprise. "You were?" Maynard nodded emphatically. "I'm not the kind of man who goes to bed with a woman on the first date, you know." She giggled, because she'd just been thinking pretty much the same thing. "I'm glad to hear it." Before she could open her car door, he hurried around the car and opened it for her. As she stepped out of the car, he lowered his head to hers, kissing her softly. "I'm not above kissing on the first date, though." "I'm glad to hear that too," she said with a wink as she walked to the door and unlocked it. "The cabin isn't much, but it's perfect for a single person working on the ranch." She shut the door behind him, fretting a bit that she may not have thought to make her bed. Usually she did, but she wasn't always that tidy. "I'm going to go change back into Jennifer." "Don't change," he said softly. "You're perfect just the way you are." "That's where you're mistaken," she said, running into her bedroom and leaning back against the closed door. After a moment, she gathered herself and put on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. She wasn't about to wear something uncomfortable for another minute. After gathering her wits about her once again, she opened the door and found him in the living room, his feet up on her coffee table. Thankfully he'd taken his shoes off first, and his suit jacket hanging over the back of a chair. He looked perfectly at ease, his thumb on the remote. Maynard glanced at her, and his eyes smoldered. "Hey there. I think I like you in shorts more than a wedding dress." "Oh really?" Jennifer asked. She was surprised any man would prefer a woman who was so casually dressed. "Sure. I can see your legs in the shorts." She laughed even as she blushed, walking around the sofa to sit beside him. "Are you hungry? Can I get you anything to drink?" "No, I'm good." I thought it would be nice to just sit and talk for a while. You know, like we would if we were on our first date and not already married. Sounds good to me. Jennifer decided then it was time to take control of the conversation. Where did you grow up? I'm from a small town in Nebraska. I lived there until I went to college, and then I started doing some commercials in Omaha. I'd never meant to become an actor, but it happened. Have you lived in California? Isn't that where you're supposed to go to land parts and wait tables to pay the bills while you dream of being a big-time actor? He grinned at her. I kind of skipped that part. How? I'm really not sure. My theater professor at school was always trying to push his students into auditioning for everything and anything. He knew of a producer who had open auditions for these commercials, and that was that for me. I got an agent from the commercials, and I've never had to work hard at finding work. Of course, I was willing to wait tables, but I did it in Omaha, not in LA. That works for me. I'm glad you found the job you wanted. Oh, I'm not sure I'll act forever, but it'll be fun for a while at least. Jennifer was surprised at that. What else would you do? I have a degree in psychology. I might go on to get my master's and practice. I might find something else I want to do entirely. I just know that this year, I'm acting. Sounds good to me. What about you? How did you end up in Idaho? She shrugged, wondering just how much she should tell him. I needed a new start. My parents have always been in the hotel business, and it's what I know, so I was looking for a hotel job outside of Colorado. I ended up here. I was attracted to you the first time I saw you. Was that January? Or was it March? I don't remember. I just remember I saw you standing at the counter, and I thought to myself that I wanted a girl like you to spend the rest of her life with me. Why didn't you ask me out? She asked, surprised. I was afraid you were already attached. A girl as pretty as you usually is. I mean, I hoped that you weren't, but I was feeling pretty shy, and I didn't ask. Shy? Are actors ever really shy? This one is. I'm great when I'm on a stage or in front of a camera, but when I'm talking to some girl I've never met before, I'm super shy and confused. Well, you should have asked, because I would have gone out with you, and we could have saved Dr. Lachelle the trouble. Would you really have? Even thought my name is Maynard Butts? Her eyes met his. I think I would have. I might have tried to convince you to change your name, but I'd have gone out with you. She leaned forward and brushed her lips across his, so he would know she was joking. She hoped. You really do hate my name, don't you? She shrugged. Jennifer Butts is not the name I grew up wanting to be called. Did you never tire of the constant torment the name must have brought you as a child? I guess I hated it, but I still think the name is the right one for me. What about our children? Do you want them to be stuck with Butts for a last name? If so, then I insist on naming our son Harry. He frowned at her. Please don't make fun of the name. I was raised by my grandparents, and they were the most wonderful people alive. They weren't ashamed of being Butts, and they taught me not to be ashamed either. He wasn't sure he could ever explain how much his name actually meant to him. He knew the name was horrid, but that didn't seem to matter. She rubbed the back of her neck, embarrassed, but not really wanting to agree to give any children they had the last name of Butts. She couldn't do that to her unborn children. Or her unconceived children. Why were you raised by your grandparents? She asked, changing the subject rather than talking about children's names. Well, I already told you my dad died in Desert Storm. My mother was convinced that there was no way she could keep going with a small child and no husband. So she drank poison. She took me to my grandparents' house first, though. That was kind of her. Jennifer frowned at him. I'm surprised you're so, well, normal is the word coming to mind. Maynard smiled. My grandparents truly were the best choice for me. They doted on me and treated me as if I was the most important person in their entire world. My father was their only child, and they missed him horribly, but I looked just like him. Some people would have looked at me and been sad, but not my grandparents. They looked at me and only saw me. The love they'd shown him, despite the circumstances, was truly epic. I can't wait to meet them. I'll take you to Nebraska soon, but not this week. This week we're on our honeymoon and getting to know each other better. Jennifer smiled at that, resting her head on his shoulder. I like the idea of taking a full week with just us. Too bad we can't go up in the mountains and hide from the rest of the world. Is there someone on the ranch you want to hide from? Not exactly. It's just, well, Jacqueline is a little bit odd, and I think she's got her eyes on us and making sure we're happy together. Is that a bad thing? Maynard barely knew Jacqueline, but he liked what he did know. She was a good person in his eyes. I guess not. I'm sure it will be just fine. Jennifer curled her legs under her, resting her head on his shoulder. What do you like to do when you're not acting or waiting tables? I like to do jigsaw puzzles, hike, and swim. All things we can do this week. I have a couple of puzzles in my closet. She'd found that as she'd learned how to be kind to people, she would do puzzles in the evenings, replaying every word of conversations she'd had. You do? Do you want to start one? Jennifer jumped up and walked to the closet, pulling out the two puzzles she had. One was a landscape scene set in Yellowstone of a waterfall, and the other was a basket full of puppies. She held both up for him to see. Let's do the landscape. He got up and walked with her to the small kitchen table. It was big enough to do the puzzle on, but just barely. As she dumped out all the pieces, the two of them went to work together, immediately turning them all right side up and separating the edge pieces from the inside pieces. He stopped sorting and stared at her for a moment. I forgot to give you your wedding gift. Jennifer looked at him, frowning for a moment. I didn't get you anything. You don't need to. He jumped up and hurried over to the couch and picked up the small package on the floor. I figured being married to me, you'd eventually need this. She looked at Maynard for a moment before taking the package. What could that mean? After she opened it, her face split into a huge grin. Frank's fudge. I'm addicted to this stuff. And every woman deserves chocolate if she has to put up with a man. Who taught you that? My grandmother. Every time she got annoyed with my grandfather, he'd go to the store and get her some chocolate. She told me once that it was the only reason they were still married. He could always find the right chocolate to calm her temper and make her happy. Jennifer laughed. I don't remember my father ever plying my mother with chocolate, but I can see where it would work. Maynard shook his head, a knowing look in his eyes. They just weren't fighting in front of you. I'm sure there was much chocolate exchanged every time your father did something stupid. How do you know my father did stupid things? Truly, Jennifer had never seen her parents fight. They'd been careful to keep that part of their lives from her. Because he was a man, married to a woman. Enough said. She laughed. So you're going to do stupid things? Probably more often than I'll want to admit to them. So this is a sorry for the first thing I do wrong that I don't realize I do wrong, so you don't have to say, well, if you don't know what you did, then I'm not going to tell you. Argument has been skipped. You think you're pretty clever, don't you? Maynard shrugged, a sheepish little boy look on his face. Sometimes. I have to admit that I was taught by the best. My grandfather could get around my grandmother like nobody I've ever seen. She stepped forward and kissed him softly. Thank you for the chocolate, and I'll forgive you the first stupid thing you do. She frowned. So what about the first stupid thing I do? We'll deal with that when the time comes. Besides, I don't see you doing anything stupid. You don't know me very well yet. I will say things I don't mean. I will be rude to you and others. I'll try not to be, and I'll always be sorry after, but I'll do it over and over again. He cupped her cheek in his hand. I think you're too hard on yourself. You're a very special woman, Jennifer Butts. Jennifer let the name go without cringing. She was getting better at this game. Thank you. I hope I can live up to your image of me. They both took their seats again, across from each other, and worked on the puzzle. As they worked, they talked about their tastes in everything. What's your favorite food? Maynard asked. Real food or desserts? The answers aren't the same. Real food and then dessert. I want to know everything. Jennifer didn't even have to think about her answers. Tacos and Mori's cheesecake. Just so you know, I'm making mental notes to get myself out of hot water later, because I expect to live at least half of our marriage boiling in hot water. That's very smart of you. Now what's your favorite foods? Real food and then dessert? Steak. And orange cranberry muffins. His eyes met hers as he said the dessert. Really? I hit on your favorite dessert? He nodded, slowly. Yup. What was the point in telling her that it was only his favorite dessert since she'd made it for him? As they continued talking, they had fun just learning about one another. Her favorite color was purple while his was blue. They both preferred jeans to sweatpants. They both preferred cold weather. Skiing or sledding? She asked. Oh, that's a harder one. I love both. I'll say skiing. It feels a little bit more adventurous. And I prefer sledding. It feels a little safer. It's not exactly safe to marry a stranger, he said as he snapped a particularly difficult piece into place. He'd been hunting for the piece for more than an hour, and the puzzle was filling in all around it. It's not. I still can't believe I put myself out there that way. I also can't believe that in the game of marriage lottery, I won the grand prize. No, you didn't. She frowned at him. Why do you say that? Because you got me, not you. Jennifer laughed softly. I want you to hold off on the compliments until we know one another just a bit better. Give me a month or two. She frowned. About that, do you want me to work? I quit my job at the hotel, but I could work somewhere else instead. For now, you can do whichever you'd like. We don't need a second income, but if you get bored with just being a wife, you're welcome to get a job somewhere. Maynard shrugged. He really didn't care if she worked or not. He thought that would be a decision for her to make for herself. I'll figure it out then. Do you really want to move to Quinn Valley? He nodded. I actually have my eye on a house there. It's set up on the hill overlooking the town. Nothing super fancy, but big enough for a few kids. A few? How many kids are you wanting? Not more than a dozen. Chapter 7. Jennifer gaped at him for a moment, her jaw dropping. A dozen? Please tell me you're joking. Maynard laughed. I'd like at least one or two. If you want more, I'm happy to accommodate. I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy making them. He wiggled his eyebrows at her, hoping it would make her giggle. Instead, she blushed. I don't even know what to say to that. He shrugged. We're married. I can say what I want to say, for the most part. He popped another piece into the puzzle. Are you getting hungry? It had been an afternoon reception with hors d'oeuvres, and she realized her stomach was growling now. I'm starving. Want me to see what I can find to throw together? I wasn't planning on cooking this week, and we'll probably have to run to the grocery store in Riston tomorrow to keep stocked. She glanced at the clock on the microwave. I guess we could go out to eat now and hit the grocery store. He got to his feet. I'm not going to ask you to cook on our wedding night. We'll go out to eat and grab groceries while we're out. You don't mind? She asked. Jennifer felt strange asking him to grocery shop on his wedding night. He shook his head. Not at all. You'll have to cook in the morning if we do it that way. Do you mind cooking? Nah. Don't tell anyone, but I figured out that I really do enjoy cooking. I mean, nothing gourmet, and not all the time, but occasionally, it can be fun. Why don't tell anyone? She considered telling him how she used to be for a moment, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. He'd find out soon enough when she started throwing plates at him for no apparent reason. Well, hopefully she'd never do that, but it wasn't beyond the realm of possibilities. She shrugged. I guess I don't want people to know I'm secretly domestic. They might want me to bake cookies for bake sales or something. He laughed. I could see you wearing an apron as you baked cookies. He led her to his car and opened the door for her. What are you hungry for? Chinese? Pizza? I had pizza last night. Let's do something wild. Let's go to the steak place in town. That sounds good. Maynard nodded as he pulled from the driveway. Now you're speaking my language. Meat and potatoes. So you're not one of those Hollywood types who's always on a diet. Me? A Hollywood type? I'm more the guy who pumps your gas at the local convenience store. I don't know how I got sucked into this job, and I can't say I don't love it, but it doesn't really suit me to be famous if that makes sense at all. I was watching an old Lazy Love the other night. You were on there as Mary Beth's love interest. Maynard shrugged. Yeah, I was on a few episodes. That's how I met Steven, the producer for Legacy. It's a fun group to work with. They're all tight-knit, which makes it easy to just pop in, do a few shows, and pop back out. I got to meet Valerie and Jesse when they were here for Dr. Michelle's wedding. They were really down to earth and nice. It surprised me. They were more down to earth than she had been before her transformation. They'd been famous, but she'd been famous in her own mind. She rolled her eyes at herself, glad it was dark and he couldn't see it. He pulled into the steak place, and they went in. It was a Saturday night, but even at that, it wasn't terribly busy. It was the tail end of the summer tourist season, and most people seemed to be staying on the ranch. Yeah, Jesse and Valerie are amazing. So are Amber and Bob really. Just genuinely nice people. They're my role models. No matter how famous I get, I always want to treat people like they do. I like that as a goal. I always want to be kind to others as well. Sometimes it's not easy to be kind. He looked at her for a moment. Why isn't it easy? You just treat other people the way you want to be treated. Simple enough. She sighed. Not always. I try. He had no idea what she was talking about, but he let it go. The hostess smiled at him. Table for two? Yes, please. He followed her to the table, wondering what on earth was going on in Jennifer's head. She had seemed very kind and sweet to him, other than her short spell where she'd been making fun of his name when she hadn't realized he'd been listening. After they were seated, he asked, What do you want to do this week? Hang out on the ranch? Could we go house shopping? Jennifer asked. I'd love to see the house you're interested in. It sounds amazing to me. I'd like that a lot. How much time have you spent in Quinn Valley? Not a lot. I went there for the first time yesterday for a massage, a foot detox, and a foot zone. It was really nice to meet some of the people I've been talking to on the phone for months. I didn't realize you dealt with people there. Jennifer shrugged. If the hotel here is full, then we'll call over to Quinn Valley and see if we can get people into the hotels there. Oh, that's nice. I didn't realize you did that. Technically, they're the competition, but the Westons and the Quinns have a good working relationship, and they've done that for a while. I got to meet Roxanne yesterday, and she and I have talked at least a dozen times. It was really nice to meet her face to face. She leaned forward, as if to share a secret. And there's this taco truck that parks in front of her hotel. The tacos are amazing. I had some for lunch yesterday, and Mom brought me some today. That good, huh? Maynard glanced down at his menu. Maybe we need to move to Quinn Valley, just for the taco truck. I would. Jennifer thought she might be in heaven if she could have taco truck tacos every day for lunch. He shook his head at her. You're a little bit crazy. Has anyone ever told you that? Mean was the word that was usually used. Nope. No one has ever told me that. I kind of like you thinking I'm a little crazy though. It makes me feel special. I do think you're special, Jennifer. I can't wait to get to know you even better. He took her hand and brought it to his lips. Dr. Lachelle made me happy with our match. Jennifer sighed softly. She made me happy too. She just really hoped he would continue to be happy with her as they got to know each other better. It was her biggest worry at the moment. When they returned to the cabin, he carried the groceries in while she put them away. So what are you making for breakfast in the morning? He asked. I thought I'd make another batch of those orange cranberry muffins, if that sounds good. That sounds better than anything else I can possibly think of. He caught her by the waist and pulled her to him, resting his cheek atop her head. I think our wedding went great, and our marriage is starting out beautifully. Don't you? Jennifer smiled. I do think so. She just prayed she could maintain her positive attitude. She wasn't one who usually did that well at all. Where am I sleeping? He asked. I'm going to assume there's only one bedroom here? Yes, there is. Do you mind sleeping on the couch? Or we could sleep together and just sleep. I'll take the couch. I can't promise that I can lie next to you all night long and not want to have my way with you. He kissed her forehead. Are you ready for bed now? Or do you want to work on our puzzle a little longer? Let's keep working on the puzzle for a while. It's not like either of us need to be up early. She sat down in the chair he had been sitting in earlier. Hey, that's my spot. I think it's a good idea for us to change perspectives. We'll find more pieces faster this way. He looked at her for a moment before shrugging. I guess it's always good to see something from other people's point of view. They worked on the puzzle in silence for a few minutes before he asked, should I call a real estate agent so we can look at houses on Monday? That would be great if you don't mind. Are you ready to buy now? Or should we wait a little while? Let's just go ahead and do it. I don't have any reason to wait. As far as I'm concerned, our marriage is going to last the rest of our lives, so we might as well find the house we want to raise our 36 children in now. Jennifer stared at him for a minute. I thought we agreed to just getting a puppy? No, we're having dozens and dozens of kids. Maynard winked at her, and Jennifer blushed. She realized then that no one had ever really teased her. She wasn't sure if she liked it or not. Do you always tease? She asked softly. You can tell when I really like someone by how much I tease them, he said. If I don't like you at all, I'm extremely polite and kind. If I love you, nothing out of my mouth is anything but tease. So I guess I'm falling somewhere right in the middle right now. I guess we'll need to work on that. He laughed. Now you get it. She realized she did get it. She would tease him right back, because that's what he expected from her. It would be good for her to have a different kind of relationship with him. She thought for the millionth time that day that she was glad it was him Dr. Lachelle had chosen for her. She would have felt as if she was cheating on him with anyone else. I'm going to go ahead and make up the couch and get linens for you. I'm not quite ready for bed, but when I am, I'm not going to want to have to get the couch ready. He watched her move through the cabin with quiet efficiency. He could not imagine why she had never married. In his eyes, she was practically perfect in every way. Why, she was a modern-day Mary Poppins. Asterisk. Jennifer woke early the following morning and immediately went to the kitchen to start the muffins she'd promised Maynard. She walked quietly, hoping she wouldn't disturb him. It was strange having a man sleep in her home, but she was going to have to get used to it. Being married meant living together. She had just popped the muffins in the oven when she saw him standing quietly, watching her. He was wearing just a pair of shorts, and her eyes were mesmerized by his chest and shoulders. "G'morning, Maynard." "G'morning, Jennifer." He swooped in for a quick kiss. "I like watching you cook." He reminded her a bit of a girl she'd shared a cabin with at camp when she was in 6th grade. She'd woken up to the other girl watching her sleep, and she had freaked out. She'd insisted she be allowed to change cabins and never have to do another activity with the girl, because she'd been so creeped out by her. She felt warmed by Maynard watching her though. That was probably a good thing. "I'm not sure how exciting it could possibly be, but I'm happy to entertain you. I thought we could go over to Quinn Valley today. I'll drive you around and show you that house I like. Maybe we can have lunch there in town, but I don't know if the taco truck will be out. I've eaten those tacos for lunch 2 days in a row. I can probably live without eating there again today. The restaurant at the hotel is nice, and there are some smaller restaurants around town. Roxanne mentioned something about her cousins owning a pub if you want to stop there. Could be fun," he said with a shrug. "Let's just play it by ear. I'd love to drive around the countryside too. See how high we can drive into the mountains maybe. We could rent 4-wheelers over at the hotel there, too. Then we could spend the day exploring on those." His eyes lit up at that. "I'd love to explore the mountains that way. See if the house I'm looking at is really the best one for us. Do you know of any good trails in town?" "No, but I'm sure the hotel has maps. They provide everything." He rubbed his hands together. "That sounds like fun. We'll spend the morning driving around town, checking things out. Then we can spend the afternoon on the 4-wheelers doing the same thing." "Sounds good to me." She pulled the muffins from the oven and flipped the pan over, dumping the muffins onto her freshly scrubbed counter. "Milk with that? Or coffee?" "Just milk. I only drink coffee when I need the jolt of caffeine to start my day." She grinned. "Me too actually." They ate the muffins, and he hurried off to shower, obviously excited by their plans for the day. He wanted to get started exploring the town they'd chosen as their new home the same as she did. As she was cleaning up the kitchen, her eyes fell on the invitation she'd received at work a couple of days previously. She looked at it again, trying to find a clue as to what she was being invited to do. There was no clue there, though. She wondered if she went if she'd be allowed to take a date. A half-hour later, they were out the door, and on their way to Quinn Valley. The other town had been populated by the Quinns, as the name indicated, but the Quinns were actually a very odd family from what she could see. Each generation seemed to have 5 children, and then each child would have 5 children, and each of them would have 5 children. No one seemed to have the ability to have a number other than 5 for anything. As they drove, she told him what she knew about the Quinn Hotel and Spa. "Roxanne is my Quinn contact, and her father bought the hotel in 2008 or so. He's done a full makeover of it and constructed the spa. Her mother owned a little shop that she did her work out of before the spa was opened, and Roxanne calls her a redneck witch doctor. She told me what her mother does, but it was something I'd never heard of, so I've forgotten. Some sort of natural healing, I think. Sounds like they're a busy family." "Oh, you don't know the half of it. Her father just bought out the water park in town, and he's planning to have it completely enclosed by winter. So then they'll have more for families to do in the winter. Some of the people I work with have said that they like to go in the winter, because they'd sled or ski all day and then they'd go and sit in the natural hot springs at night. I was in those springs on Friday, and they're just amazing. I'm not sure if they have the natural healing that everyone claims they have, but I do know they feel good when you're in them. So you really like the idea of moving there, don't you? I absolutely do. I love the idea of raising kids in an environment like that. I wouldn't mind raising kids at River's End Ranch, but most of the people who have families who work there live in Reston and commute. I love that I could live right there in town and be able to walk to the hotel for the hot springs. I haven't spent a lot of time looking around Quinn Valley, but I've researched good places to buy homes near River's End, and Quinn Valley comes up over and over. I think it's where I want to be. Jennifer smiled. The few people she'd offended since she moved to Idaho were all on River's End Ranch. She would be starting with a fresh slate again. Perfect for a woman in her position. She looked over at Maynard with a smile. It's where we'll be. Chapter 8. When Maynard drove her by the house he liked, Jennifer was impressed at the look of it. A lot of the homes in Quinn Valley were older, but this one seemed very well preserved. I think I like it. At least the outside of it. Have you seen the inside? She asked, watching over her shoulder as they passed it slowly. Only in the pictures on the internet, he answered immediately, watching her face as she looked at the outside of the house. I love that huge tree in the yard. Our puppy can have a treehouse there. Our dozens of children, you mean? Maybe you can build a doghouse. Jennifer had to turn her face away so he wouldn't see her grin. She'd never really had someone she could tease with before, and she liked it. She liked it a lot. They drove around the little town, noting different features that interested them. That grocery store looks just big enough to buy the essentials as long as you don't care if you have a choice between brand names and generic, she commented. I like the little shops that line the main street. I can't believe there's a shop called Earth Mother in town. What could that be? I think they have a little of everything here. I love that there's a bathing suit shop, so if someone forgot theirs, they can just buy one. I bet it's only twice the price of what a swimsuit would cost in a bigger city. Jennifer liked the feel of Quinn Valley a little more with every street they drove down, and she was certain they made it down every street in the whole town. When they finally stopped for lunch, she was more enchanted with the little town than she had been the previous day, and she was ready to move in as soon as someone would let her. They went to the pub for lunch, wanting to support one of the businesses run by the Quinn family, who fascinated Jennifer. The food was good and the service was exceptional. I will be coming back here, Maynard said as they left. This is the kind of place that I really enjoy eating. Next, they went to the hotel and rented 2 four-wheelers. They're our last 2, the front desk girl told Jennifer. This is our last weekend of summer, and everything is a little bit crazy. I'm glad we came in when we did then. Jennifer glanced over her shoulder at Maynard, who was looking around the hotel. Aren't you? Yes, I am. I don't know how I could have spent the next few hours with my new bride if there was no four-wheeler involved. She stuck her tongue out at him as she finished signing the paperwork for the vehicles. Do you have a map of the trails that we can take? The front desk person handed her a map. Any of those are just fine. There also are snowmobile trails in the winter if you want to come back. I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot of us, Jennifer said with a smile. It was funny, but she'd never enjoyed doing things outdoors back home in Silver Springs, but Idaho brought out the outdoors woman in her. She spent hours every week walking around the ranch and sitting on the lakeshore. She was glad there was a river here in Quinn Valley, because she didn't think she could give up her time by the water. It re-energized her like nothing else ever had. Soon they were on the trail they'd chosen, and Maynard was leading the way. He turned away from the main trail and followed a less traveled one. After a while, he slowed down, pulling to a stop, waiting for Jennifer to stop beside him. Are we supposed to be looking for Bigfoot? He asked. No, not here. Kelsey wants proof that Bigfoot lives on River's End Ranch. I don't think she would be pleased at all if we found him in Quinn Valley. Maybe we should be looking for a sea monster here. A sea monster? Don't tell me there are tales of a sea monster. Well, sure there are. There have to be tales of monsters, or it wouldn't be Idaho, now would it? I think I'm just a Midwest boy at heart. This place scares me a little with all the monsters. Jennifer laughed, leaning toward Maynard to kiss him. You want to know something? She asked. What? I think I really like you, Maynard. Name and all. You don't have to like my name. You just have to deal with it, he said, a grin on his face as he started his machine again. It was nice to hear that she liked him. Even his name. Asterisk. When Maynard called a real estate agent the next morning, he agreed to meet the man at the house at 1 in the afternoon. He was excited, but almost afraid to express it to Jennifer. Everything was falling into place a little too smoothly. He and Jennifer hadn't even had a fight yet, and he was seriously considering picking one, just to see how they dealt with an argument. Of course, he was enjoying the peace too much for that. We're seeing the house at 1. Does that work for you? Jennifer nodded. It sure does. Then we can get tacos on the way there. You're still obsessed with that taco truck, aren't you? Well, the tacos are wonderful. Have you ever had a sapapilla? She asked. What's a sapapilla? You just wait. In a couple of hours, you're going to understand my obsessions with tacos and that particular taco truck. I have no designs on the man, I promise. Just his tacos. Maynard laughed softly. I have no doubt you're after his tacos. I can see the drool forming at the corner of your lips just because you're thinking about them. Without thinking, Jennifer reached up and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. When Maynard started laughing harder, you believed me, didn't you? I've had his tacos. And sapapillas. I will never again be happy with less. Never. I guess we're having tacos for lunch. Do we eat them in the car? Nah, there's a pavilion next to the truck. I think he had it commissioned. He? You don't even know his name, and you salivate when you see his truck? It was all Jennifer could do not to wipe her mouth again. It was something odd. I don't know. Maynard shook his head at her. I'm going to shower. Be ready to go in an hour. No problem. She had no idea why he wanted her to be ready in an hour, but she wasn't going to complain. The man was making her head spin at times, but she knew she was falling for him a little more every day. She cleaned the kitchen and loaded the dishwasher before going into her bedroom and making sure her hair was brushed out well. When she left her room, he was standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall, just looking at her. You're beautiful, you know. I'm not. Jennifer shook her head. I'm your average everyday boring girl. No, you're anything but average and boring. Maynard reached out and pulled her toward him, holding her close. You're the most beautiful girl I've ever met. Why do you think I was obsessed with you even before I knew you were going to be my wife? Oh, you weren't obsessed with me. I spent at least 4 hours watching you work. 10 minutes here and 20 minutes there. I couldn't take my eyes off you. Jennifer put her hands on his shoulders, looking into his eyes. Are you making all that up to try to get me to fall for you? No, I'm telling you how I fell for you. He lowered his head and brushed his lips across hers, before deepening the kiss. When he finally lifted his head, Jennifer felt as if hers was spinning. Now that was a kiss, Maynard Butts. Hey, you're improving. You said my name with no flinching at all. She laughed. I had to do some self-hypnosis, and I've been working hard on it, but it looks like it's all finally paying off. He laughed. You're a brat, Mrs. Butts. Did you know that? She did wrinkle her nose then. How about Ms. Olson? How about Mrs. Butts? We might have to talk this out later. Jennifer grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. I don't know why we're leaving so early, but if it makes you happy, then I'm willing. We might get caught in an Idaho traffic jam, he said with a straight face. What exactly is an Idaho traffic jam? 3 ranchers on 4-wheelers and a bunch of cattle in the middle of the road. I got caught behind that just the other day. I couldn't believe it. It seems like every time I go somewhere, I get caught behind cows, deer, or road chipping equipment. I swear, there's no real traffic here, but you get caught behind stuff all the time. Jennifer grinned at him. And we're going to buy a house here? What's wrong with us? We love Idaho, I guess. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders as they walked outside. Let's walk by the lake before we head to Quinn Valley. Why? Are you going to ask me to marry you? Of course, I am. What else would I do? She stopped walking. Hey, Maynard? Yes, Jennifer? We're already married. He laughed. We are, but you still deserve a marriage proposal you can tell our grandkids about. Don't you? I'm not sure. She still didn't feel like she deserved much. Every minute she spent with him felt like a major deception to her. You are worth so much to me. You know that, don't you? She shook her head, tears springing to her eyes. Don't. Just don't. She wanted to run from him, sobbing her heart out, but she could just stand there and feel like a fool. What did I say? Is it time for me to invoke the chocolates from our wedding night? She sniffled, but laughed at the same time. You know you could let me have a good cry, don't you? Not on my watch. He wasn't sure exactly what was wrong, but he put his arm back around her and walked toward the lake. He couldn't imagine how his words would have made her cry, unless there was someone else she was in love with. Wanting to ask, he realized he really didn't want the answer. No, he'd wait. For a little while longer. Have your parents gone back to Colorado? She nodded. Yeah. They left yesterday morning. Does that make you sad? Not at all. I'm glad they're back home where they belong. And I don't. It was nice that they came for the wedding though. I hadn't seen them since January. They're not exactly next door. His mind was suddenly filled with questions about her hometown, but something kept him from asking. When she wanted him to know what was going on in her head, she'd tell him. He was sure of it. They reached the picnic table and there, on the table in front of them, was another invitation like Jennifer had gotten on her last day at work. It had Maynard's name on it. He picked it up and turned it over in his hand. What is this? Jennifer frowned at the object. I got one of those exactly like it on my last day of work. I think it's an invitation to something in the event barn, but it doesn't say what or who is throwing the party. That's really strange. He slowly opened the envelope and read the invitation. You're right. That's exactly what it is. Who knows me well enough to invite me anywhere? He looked at the outside of the envelope once more, as if he hadn't already studied the whole thing. And who knew we'd be walking this way right now? This is really weird. It is, but I have no answers for you. Jennifer plucked the invitation from his hand and looked at it. The handwriting was exactly the same as hers, and it was for the same day. Yup. Identical to the one I got. Others who worked for the hotel didn't get them though. I have no idea what's going on. Are we going? He asked. You can bet you're sweet, but we are. There's no way I'm going to stay away and not have that mystery solved. Maynard looked at her with wide eyes. You think my butt is sweet? She laughed. Is that the only part you heard of what I said? Well, yeah. You're talking about my tushy, and I didn't even realize you'd noticed it. He sighed happily. I think you like me. You're a silly man. Of course, I like you. I almost broke off our wedding so I could date you. That means I like you a lot. Do you want to talk about what happened back there? He asked softly. She shook her head. Not yet. Someday, you'll understand it all, but I'm not ready to talk. All right. He stood up and took her hand. Let's walk down by the water. There are still a few fishing boats out there, but it's not full of people swimming and paddle boating anymore. Yeah, in the fall, it's a little quieter here until the winter activities start. Once we have our first good snowfall, it'll fill up again. This is the time of year when we have corporate events, and that sort of thing going on. Will you miss working here? Jennifer thought about it for a moment. Until a year ago, I didn't think I'd ever have to work. I thought my life was complete just flitting around and being a social butterfly. She was simplifying things, but she didn't think he was ready for the whole truth, and she knew she wasn't ready to tell him. But I've realized that I adore working. I like being with people every day and helping others. I might need to find at least a part-time job in Quinn Valley to stay busy. That's fine. I probably don't want you to have a full-time career after the dozens of children start coming, but if that's what you really want, we could discuss. What if I want to go back to school and become a neuroscientist? He shrugged. I'd pay your way through school, and I'd hope you wouldn't dump me when you realized that I'm just a pretty face who's pretty good at memorizing what to say. She laughed. I won't be a neuroscientist. I might decide to work a few hours a week in the hotel, though. I do enjoy that sort of work. I think you should. Just make sure you look behind you before you start making fun of guests' names. Wrinkling her nose, she sighed. I've only done that once, and I got caught. I've learned my lesson. It was a hard one, but I will recover from my feelings of guilt over the way I talked about my favorite guest. Wow. Maynard looked down at her with a grin. I was your favorite guest? I beat out every other guest on the ranch? You better not keep saying things like that or my head is going to get so big I won't fit through the door of your cabin. She shook her head at him. Do you ever stop teasing? Every third Tuesday, he responded, completely deadpan. He pulled his phone from his pocket and checked the time. We need to go to Quinn Valley if we're going to make it in time to have tacos and those other things you mentioned. Sopapillas? Just wait until you've tried one. Then you'll understand. As they walked toward the car, he said, just remember. I'm not here to judge you. If you have something you need to talk about, I will listen. I appreciate that. I wish I had a way to explain exactly what's going through my head, but I'm just not quite ready. Maybe soon. They got into the car, and he reversed out of her driveway. If we love the house as much as I think we will, are you okay with putting an offer down on it today? Yes, I'm totally fine with that. She'd never even dreamed of homeownership. She figured she'd marry a man who already had everything and the choice would be out of her hands. Suddenly she was excited at the idea of decorating the house he'd shown her in pictures. She wanted to change some of the paint and maybe redo the kitchen floors. She hated hardwood in kitchens. To her, tile made so much more sense. Good. I want to move quickly. We don't have much longer in that little cabin of yours, and I want to have a place that's ours. Not mine and not yours. One that we've chosen together. Not my employee cabin on the ranch or your hotel room. I don't know why you don't want to stay there. I guess I'm just boring like that. He glanced over at her and saw that she was in a better frame of mind. He was so pleased. Making her cry was the worst thing he'd done in a long time. He just wished he understood what he'd done. Chapter 9. As they ate their lunch, Maynard had to admit that Jennifer had been right about the tacos. They were fabulous, and so were the sopapillas. They're like little bites of doughy pillows with honey. I want to eat these every day. And that's why we're moving to Quinn Valley, Jennifer said with a wink. He laughed, glancing at the clock on his phone. I think we have time to get one more batch of sapapillas. What do you think? Share it with me? She tilted her head to one side and considered him. I don't know. I have a feeling you won't be so attracted to me if I put on 50 pounds of taco weight. Shrugging, he took her hand and kissed it. I have a feeling it's the inner Jennifer I'm falling for. Not the beauty you show the whole world, but the girl inside. He stood and walked toward the taco truck, calling over his shoulder, I'm getting some to share. A minute later, he was back at the picnic table with the sapapillas, and they both put butter and honey on them. These things are truly amazing. I know. I couldn't believe how much you talked about them until I tried them for myself. His tacos are far superior to any others I've eaten, but the sapapillas are the real driving force for me. When I'm working, you'll have to bring them to me, so I don't get hungry. You could go to the cafe for Bob's special. Or I could have tacos and sapapillas. Maybe I'll need to alternate. Jennifer couldn't help but grin. You're a little bit crazy, Maynard, but I really like you anyway. Good, because I'm hoping to be in escrow by the end of the day. Maynard got to his feet and threw his trash away. This picnic pavilion is going to be worthless in the winter, but it sure is nice now. They walked to the house instead of driving, wanting to know how long it took to get to the center of town where the hotel and taco truck were. When they arrived, there was a man in sunglasses sitting in a sedan. As they approached, he got out and held his hand out to Maynard to shake. I'm Chad Carter. You called me to see the house. Yes, I'm Maynard Butts, and this is my wife, Jennifer. We're newlyweds and looking to move to Quinn Valley. It's a good spot to start a family. We're in the Riston School District here. Children would start here in Quinn Valley for elementary school, and then go to Riston for middle and high school. Chad walked toward the house as he talked. This house was built in 1957, but it's been renovated recently. Everything is completely modern inside. The kitchen was redone just last year. There are 2 ovens, pull-out cabinets, a dishwasher. The woman who lived here was a gourmet cook, and she wanted it perfect. He unlocked the door and waited for Maynard and Jennifer to precede him into the house. The ceiling was arched and high, and there was a staircase that split the living room into halves. There was even a small balcony at the top. Jennifer could picture her daughter walking down the stairs in a wedding gown. It was as if the house spoke to her. She looked over at Maynard and saw the pleasure on his face as well. They had to look at the rest of it, but she was relatively certain they'd found their new home. 20 minutes later, they were leaving the house. I have a couple of other homes that are in the same price range here in Quinn Valley that I can show you if you're interested. Jennifer and Maynard exchanged a glance, and he shook his head. No need. We're ready to make an offer. It was obvious Chad was used to having to show a lot more homes before someone found the one they wanted to buy, but he tried to hide it. Sounds good. My office is a few blocks from here. Let's go sit down and we'll fill out the paperwork. He glanced at them. Do you want to take my car? Or would you prefer to walk? It's a gorgeous day, Maynard said with a grin. Let's just walk. Jennifer was surprised by how long it took to do all the paperwork to agree to buy the house, but once it was done, she was pleased. When do you think we can take possession? She asked softly. Oh, the owners will be thrilled to get your offer, and since we're not waiting on loan documents, we can probably get it all completed in a couple of weeks. Chad seemed genuinely pleased to help them. He wasn't a typical realtor with dollar signs in his eyes. Maynard grinned at her, squeezing her hand, and Jennifer realized they were truly going to build a life together. He wasn't running at every little thing, and he was truly happy with her. For now. Do you want to go furniture shopping now? I bet you can pick out some things and have them delivered the day we do take possession. Chad grinned. You guys can window shop, but I wouldn't buy yet. I think that we want to make sure your offer is accepted first. I don't see why it wouldn't be, but someone else may have made an offer already today. Is that likely? Maynard asked. Not at all. This house has been on the market for 6 months, and no offers have been made yet. All right. We'll window shop, but know that we're going to take possession of this house just as soon as we can. Sounds good. Chad shook hands with both of them. I'll get the offer over to the previous owners, and we'll make everything happen from here. I'm looking forward to working with you both. As they walked back to their car, Jennifer glanced at Maynard. You really want to go furniture shopping? Yes. I want us to be ready to fill that house with furniture and then our dozens of babies. Puppies. Why don't you ever listen to me? He laughed. Where's the best place to shop for furniture around here? I have a feeling we're not going to get a huge selection in Riston or in Quinn Valley. There are some good antique stores here in Quinn Valley, but if we want a selection of new furniture, we need to head to Lewiston, I think. Are you up for that? Maynard shrugged. I don't have to work until a week from today. My whole life is just spending time with my beautiful wife. Well, then let's go furniture shopping. And you can take me out for dinner and a movie while we're in Lewiston too. There's a movie theater here. I saw it. She looked at him, shaking her head sadly. It plays one movie, and it's not always a current movie. If you want current movies and an actual selection, you have to drive to Lewiston. Lewiston it is. Do you care if we get in late? He knew it was an hour and a half to Lewiston, and then the drive back, plus they'd spend a lot of time at the movie and shopping. It was going to be a very late night. Nah. As long as I can sleep while you drive. Isn't that a song? Maybe. Soon, they were in the car and on their way to Lewiston. While he drove, she played games on her phone and dreamed about the way she wanted to decorate. What's my furniture budget? She asked. He named a figure much larger than she'd expected. Really? You wouldn't mind if I spent that much? Not at all. I want the house to look beautiful as well. I think I'm going to like being married to you. He frowned. He knew she'd had no way of knowing what her finances would be like once she married, but that was one of his worries about finding a bride on his own. She didn't seem like she was just after money, but it was certainly a possibility. Let's just hope our tastes in furniture are the same. If they're not, who gets to win? He shrugged. As long as I get one of the future nurseries for a man cave, I'll be content to let you pick stuff out. Future kennels? She retorted. She did want children, but 3 or 4 would be enough for her. The dozens he was talking about frightened her more than a little. Once they got to Lewiston, they Googled a furniture store and found one close to where they were. They were both unfamiliar with the town, so it was a comedy of errors trying to find the place. As soon as they pulled into the parking lot, Maynard's phone rang. Hello? Mr. Butts, this is Chad. Your offer was accepted. Buy any furniture you want. You take possession in 2 weeks. Thank you. Maynard hung up and looked at Jennifer. It looks like we're about to be homeowners. Seriously? Are you joking? Not at all. Let's go pick out that furniture. Maynard felt as if they were getting closer and closer to being a real couple. Having a house and furniture meant they were married forever, didn't it? As it happened, they did have very similar tastes in furniture. If she suggested something, he would like something very much like it, but with one small tweak, that she always found she liked better as well. They rushed through the store and found so many things they both loved right away. When it came to purchasing a bedroom suite, she was a little trepidatious. She knew they'd be sharing whatever bed they picked out, and it felt strange that they hadn't yet. Maybe it was time for her to tell him that she was ready to move past their getting-to-know-you stage. Jennifer sighed. No. She had to be completely honest with him first. He needed to know what she was afraid of, and they would decide together if they could move on. Of course, with a house purchase underway, they'd better be able to move on. Asterisk. It was after midnight when they arrived home that night, but Jennifer wasn't nearly ready for bed. She needed to talk to him about her past. About the kind of person she really was deep down inside. She didn't know how she'd been able to mask it for so long, but she needed him to know her truth. When Maynard walked into the cabin, he yawned. I'm tired. Me too. Jennifer looked at him, wringing her hands together a bit. Do you want to work on our puzzle a bit more? There's something I think I need to talk to you about, and I don't think you're going to like it. How could he? He was a good person, and it showed in everything he did. He frowned at her. All right. He sat down and looked down at all the puzzle pieces strewn all over the table, wondering what she could possibly have to tell him that he wouldn't like. She wasn't pregnant, was she? It's about my life in Silver Springs, she said, gently leading into the conversation. When he knew her truth, she was sure he wouldn't want to have anything to do with her anymore. Divorce papers would be in the mail. Were you engaged to someone there? Maynard asked immediately. It was the only thing he could think of that she could be hiding from him. She was pining for another man. Had he died? Married someone else? Jennifer shook her head, staring at him with a confused expression. Where did you come up with that? He shrugged. I just figured because of some things you've said that you had to be in love with someone else. He tried to act like it didn't bother him, but it did. How could it not? That's not it at all. She took a deep breath. I'm a mean girl. I'm the kind of woman no other girls have ever wanted to be around, because I say horrible things and try to steal their boyfriends, even though I don't want them. I'm really a terrible person. He gaped at her, absolutely shocked. That was the last thing he'd expected her to say. I've seen you with lots of other women, and you've always been kind, and they always seem to be happy to spend time with you. What are you talking about? She sighed. That's now. A year and a half ago, my parents made me start working for these two cousins. They were best friends, and I'd done everything I could to make them hate each other. They were in my class from kindergarten through graduation, and I felt like they were always leaving me out of everything. I was meaner to them than to any other women, but I was mean to everyone. Absolutely everyone. Why? She shrugged. I needed to always be the center of attention. I can't blame my parents, but they did make it easy for me to be nasty. They made sure I always had the prettiest clothes, and I always did everything I wanted. When they realized how utterly horrid I was, they made me work in the cousin's bed and breakfast. I had to learn to cook from Brie, who was my favorite victim. She didn't want to work with me, but my parents offered them money they needed to get their business off the ground to train me. I bet that was hard for you. Harder for them, I think. Becca taught me how to clean. I hated cleaning. I learned fast though. And then they made me learn how to talk to customers. My parents owned the big hotel next door to the bed and breakfast. I liked being the reigning princess and lording it over everyone else. She looked down at her hands, realizing then she hadn't picked up a single puzzle piece, so she took one in her hand and started trying to match the colors on it. I spent the next 6 months working in my parents' hotel, and I was good at what I did. I was kind to everyone. But no one wanted to talk to me. No one invited me to go out to eat after work. They all remembered me being so cruel. I can see that. He was surprised by all she said, but as he thought back over the past few days, it did all make sense. She truly believed she was still the person she was talking about. Is that why you came here? Jennifer nodded. I had experience in the hotel industry, and I knew I was good at what I did. so I applied to work at the front desk here. They needed a front desk manager, and I had the qualifications, so they hired me. No one here knew anything about how I used to be, so I made friends. Slowly, because I was afraid. A couple of times I lost my temper with people, so I'd make a huge apology. Like I did when you caught me talking about your name. And that's what you've been hiding from me? That you used to be a mean girl? I don't know if it's possible to just stop being mean. Deep down inside, I still want to rage at people sometimes. I see someone, and I think I should make fun of how they dress. What they say. What their name is. So, it's still inside me. I know you'll figure it out soon enough, and I didn't want to keep hiding it from you. Now you know all my deep, dark secrets. Maynard shook his head. Everyone has those thoughts. It's whether you say the horrible things in your head that makes you good or bad. You're not a mean girl anymore, Jennifer. I know you used to be, but now you're just a sweet girl, who I'm very quickly falling in love with. You need to quit worrying that you're not good enough to be married to me, because you are. We're going to live together until we're old and gray and wrinkled, and we're going to have dozens of babies and hundreds of grandchildren. She looked at him as relief washed over her. Truly, she'd believed that he would not want to even talk to her again. Babies? I think you're mispronouncing puppies. Let me write them both for you, so you can see the difference in the words. I'm sure it will help you. He took her hand and pulled her around the table to him, tugging her into his lap. There's nothing wrong with you. I'd rather you didn't teach our daughters to act like you're talking about, but I think you have gotten past it. There's nothing for you to be ashamed of. You moved here to start over, and that's exactly what you've done. You really don't think I'm a mean girl any longer? It sounds to me like if you say something you shouldn't, and we all do, you apologize and make things right. That's not mean. That's doing the right thing when you've messed up. I accidentally dumped coffee all over Gabby. I apologized and bought her flowers, and told her I was the biggest dunce alive. How is that any different? Well, you dumped the coffee on accident. The words, they're not exactly accidental. Maybe not, but you make up for them the same way I made up to Gabby. You're not a mean girl. Not at all. Have you ever apologized to Bree and Becca? She shook her head. No, and I'm not sure I could. I have a feeling it's what you need to do to feel better about yourself. Write to them and tell them how bad you feel for being so mean. Maybe. I'll see if I can find it in me. Good. Now, do you have any other deep, dark secrets you're hiding from me? She shook her head. Well, maybe one. What's that? She lowered her head to his ear and whispered what she was thinking to him. He grinned at her, pulling her to him and kissing her. I think I can take care of that right now. He jumped to his feet and took her hand, dragging her toward the bedroom. The grin never left his face. Chapter 10. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. Jennifer got everything ready for the move into the new house, while Maynard went back to work. On the day they signed papers for their move, filming was adjusted so there would be no need for Maynard to go into work, and he could instead be present for the closing on the house. They had arranged for the furniture to be delivered that day, and Jennifer was ready for everything to fall into place, just the way she'd planned. Except nothing went as planned. They closed on time, but the paperwork took longer than she'd scheduled. The delivery trucks arrived early, and she was getting calls even as her hand was cramping from signing all the documents. Maynard kept grinning at her, and she was tired of it all. She'd worked so hard to make everything perfect, and there he was smiling when it didn't go right. She glared at him as she signed the last paper. He took the keys from Chad, who had kindly gone to the signing, to help them out. If you need anything else from me, let me know, Chad said as Jennifer hurried out the door. She didn't care if Maynard went with her or not, She was not paying another delivery fee for that furniture after everything she'd already done to make things fall into line. When she got to the house, she saw the furniture truck was backing out of the driveway, and she hurried over, shaking her head. She pounded on the passenger window, and the man in the seat there jumped. "Yeah, lady? You were early, and the closing on my house went late. You're going to deliver that furniture, and you're not going anywhere." Maynard stood behind her, a grin on his face. He watched as his tiny wife took charge, telling the delivery men exactly what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. He could tell that if the little general had told the men to jump, they'd have asked how high. And what amazed him is she did it all without once raising her voice. She had stressed herself out trying to line everything up perfectly so the men would be there right after they arrived, and it hadn't worked out, but she was adjusting. No matter how many times she told him how she'd been in the past, he wasn't sure he'd ever be able to believe her after watching this. At the end of the day, he had Siren, the guy in the taco truck, appear in the driveway. "I have a surprise for you," he said softly to Jennifer, who was sitting exhausted on their new couch. He pointed out the window, and she got to her feet and ran to the truck, ordering exactly what she wanted. He followed her out, placing an order of what he wanted and getting extra sapapillas for each of them. Jennifer was quiet as she walked into the house, overwhelmed at the sweet thing her husband had just done. Once the door was closed and the tacos were on the dining room table, she turned to him and wrapped her arms around his middle, crying into his shirt front. "I don't deserve to be loved like you love me." Maynard stood there for a moment, holding her. "I've never told you I love you." "You just did. You had a taco truck pull into my driveway at the end of a really rough day. Not only did I not have to make dinner, which might have just killed me, but I got to have my favorite meal. You love me all right." Maynard chuckled softly. "I do love you. I wasn't trying to hide it from you. I love you right back, Maynard Butts. You have the most horrible name on the planet, but it's your name, and I love it because I love you so very much. I don't deserve you, but I'll take you just as you are." He picked her up off her feet and swung her in a small circle. "I'm glad you accept my name for what it is, because our kids are going to get my name too. Have you decided if you're going to stay Jennifer Olson or transition to Jennifer Butts?" Jennifer pulled away from him and calmly walked to her purse, pulling out her temporary driver's license and handing it to him. "I have chosen." He stared down at the identification card, and right there next to her picture was her name. Jennifer Butts. "You know people are going to make fun of your name for the rest of your life now, right?" She nodded. "It's worth it to have you for a husband. I don't care if the whole world knows my name and I become the butt of every joke. It's your name, and it's something that ties us together now. I'm Mrs. Maynard Butts, and I'm not even a little bit ashamed of it." He grinned at her. "I'm so glad you chose to share my name. Now we won't have to explain to the kids why Mommy has a different last name than they do. Jennifer Butts has such a nice ring to it." She rolled her eyes. "Let's eat some tacos, and you can gloat over my name change later." "Sounds good to me." Asterisk. On Saturday, September 22nd, half of the people who worked at the ranch were crowded outside the event barn. All of the Westons were there, including Bobby and Wilbur. Jennifer felt strange standing there with her new husband, waiting for the doors to open. No one knew why they were there, or how they'd received invitations, they just knew they had. Finally, the door opened, and everyone walked in. The room was completely lit by fairy lights everywhere. There were fairies hanging from the ceilings, and several of Jacqueline's lawn gnomes stood guard around the tables of food. Tables that looked like they would break under the weight of the food on them. Everyone walked inside and stood in the middle of the room, just looking around them. There was silence, which was odd for such a large group of people, but no one had any idea why they were there. And then from behind a screen came Jacqueline and Simon. They were holding hands, and Jacqueline was wearing a tea-length white dress with a wedding veil covering her gray hair. She had a silly grin on her face, and her cheeks were lit with a blush. "We knew everyone wanted us to get hitched, and Simon has asked me over and over through the years. It just didn't feel right until recently. I think it was the end of June when Simon asked for the millionth time. And this time, the fairies told me that it was time I said yes. So I did." There was much cheering in the room, and that's when Jennifer realized who was there and who wasn't. Everyone in the room had been matched by Jacqueline and her fairy friends. Well, everyone she knew. She hadn't been around long enough to know everyone in the room. As Jennifer walked across the room to try to get a word in with the bride, a bunny hopped across her foot. When she looked down, she saw that there were rabbits absolutely everywhere, hopping all over the entire barn. Her eyes met Maynard's, and she couldn't help but laugh a little. Of course the bunnies would be here for her wedding reception. Maynard nodded. Where else could they possibly be? He shook his head. When I first came to the ranch, I went to see Jacqueline. She told me to talk to Dr. Lachille if I wanted to be matched up with a woman who was perfect for me. So, I went to Dr. Lachille. I guess Jacqueline had a hand in us getting together as well as everyone else. Well, of course she did. It's her job after all. She is the matchmaker for the entire ranch. Jennifer finally made it to Jacqueline, and she hugged the other woman tightly. You did good with us, but you already know that. The fairies told you, didn't they? Jacqueline laughed. Of course they did. It's their job, just like matching everyone up is mine. She looked over at Simon, a soft look on her face. And now it's my turn to be happy as well. Who'd have thought that a woman my age would get a chance at a happily ever after? Oh, I'm sure romance readers everywhere think you should have a happily ever after. The weddings you've made happen, and all the love you've seen pass through the ranch, you needed a happily ever after too, Jacqueline, and I'm so happy you got it. Jacqueline pulled Jennifer's head to hers, and she whispered, Never think of yourself as a mean girl again. You're reformed. You are a special woman, and I don't ever want you to forget it. Jennifer had a tear in her eye as she wandered off with Maynard. Between her husband and that crazy old matchmaker, she knew that she really wasn't a mean girl anymore. She was a woman who had an infinite amount of love to give. To puppies or babies. Epilogue. Jennifer reclined on the bed in the midwife's office, a wand going over her stomach. She'd grown faster than anyone had expected, and Robin Quinn, of course her midwife was a Quinn, was expressing concern. When the doctor smiled, she knew everything was going to be all right. Maynard was beside her, his hand squeezing hers, and they both squinted at the monitor, trying to decipher whatever the midwife had seen to make her so happy. Triplets. That's why you're growing so fast. There's nothing wrong with you. Robin seemed very excited, but Jennifer wasn't sure how she felt about the idea of having 3 babies at once. She wasn't sure she could handle one. Jennifer collapsed back onto the bed, not looking at the monitor any longer. Triplets? Are you sure? There's no mistake? She'd joked about puppies, while Maynard had joked about babies so much. It looked like she was having a whole litter of babies. There's no mistake. They all look healthy. I'm going to do some quick measurements, but you're definitely having 3 babies. Now your rapid weight gain is making sense. You are a small woman, and those babies need sustenance. Jennifer shook her head. No wonder all I want to do is eat. And here I thought I had a taco addiction. Oh, everyone in Quinn Valley has a taco addiction now. Siren has spoiled us all. As Robin explained the ways her pregnancy would be different than others, Jennifer watched Maynard, wondering what was going through his mind. I'm going to have to send you to a doctor for high-risk pregnancies. There's no way I can deliver triplets. Jennifer sighed. There went her birth plan. I guess we can do that. When they left the office, he turned to her and brought her to him in a gentle hug. Triplets. She laughed. I guess that means you're happy, huh? He nodded. So happy. We've been triply blessed, my love. Just so I get to name my firstborn son Harry, I don't care about anything else. You are not naming my son Harry Butts. Jennifer frowned at him. I took your name. The least you can do is let me name my own son. It's not happening. No guilt trip in the world is going to make me give in. We'll see.